May 9th, 1941. Rough sea, North Atlantic. A bitter, wind-chapped morning where the spray stings the face and every rope on the deck hummed with salt and tension. The destroyer's searchlights carved white knives through the fog as sailors in oilskins hauled boarding lines and breathed steam into their gloves. On the heaving deck of HMS Bulldog, lieutenant and petty officers moved with a single, urgent purpose. A German submarine lay crippled and surfaced under tow, and the air tasted like spilled fuel and the iron of cold metal. He was there, the U-boat's first watch, a young petty officer with grease under his nails, the smell of diesel and wet wool clinging to his uniform, eyes glazed from weeks beneath the waves. Behind him, the U-110's conning tower gaped, hatches open, instruments torn, and a German flag flapping like an embarrassed promise. The boarding party, drawn knives at hip, rifles low, clambered down over the hull, boots splashing in seawater. The U-boat crew was stunned, disoriented, and it showed in the way one corporal clutched a rolled-up chart like a prayer. In the cramped, humming radio room, a single device sat beneath a blanket, a compact frame of brass and black, an Enigma machine. It smelled faintly of oil and old paper. The boarding officer, heart pounding under his greatcoat, ordered the blanket peeled back. For a moment, no one moved. Brass and rotor, stamp keys, and a plug board that looked like a tiny, deliberate puzzle. This object was a small, cold miracle. The petty officer who had guarded it tried to swallow his fear and curl his hands around it like a child with a forbidden toy. He hesitated. Above the clatter of waves and shouted orders, a petty officer from Bulldog barked a command. Stand aside. Hands were steady despite the cold. The Enigma was wrested free, and, with it, a pack of weather-beaten codebooks, logbooks, and circled cipher sheets damp with salt. Men held the papers up under the searchlight. Ink bled where seawater had kissed it, but the characters and daily key settings, those tiny notations that made the machine sing or lie silent, were still legible. Below deck, through the wheeze of the bilge pumps and the distant pop of a boiler, a U-boat commander slumped against a bulkhead, face white as canvas. He had been trained, like every U-boat captain, to guard the machine at all costs, to sink it before capture. The Enigma, he had been taught, was the last safeguard, an inviolable sigil of German naval precision. Now it lay in British hands, a metal heart ripped from the enemy's chest. At Admiralty signal stations, the news moved like a live wire. Photographs were taken in dim cabins, gloves removed only to steady a lens. The Enigma and its books were wrapped, crated, and shipped, not in triumphal display, but in hush and code. The Bulldog's crew had done what few imagined possible. They had taken from the Kriegsmarine a working key to the German voice. June 1941, Buckinghamshire, England. Dawn broke across the trimmed hedges and brick chimneys of Bletchley Park, a quiet English estate that, to the casual eye, looked like a country boarding school. But inside its wooden huts, typewriters clacked like machine guns. Cigarette smoke hung in the stale air, and a thin young mathematician in a wrinkled suit pressed his ear against the pulse of history. Alan Turing stood over the table where the Enigma machine, still bearing the scuffed German markings Kriegsmarine Argentum, sat like a conquered idol. Around him were engineers, cryptanalysts, linguists, the quiet army of the unknown war. Every day, messages came in through the Y stations, intercepted, jumbled, encrypted in a madness by this small device of rotors and cables. For months, they had stared at it, teased it, cursed it. Now, with the U-110 Enigma and its key books in their hands, they could finally see how the gears of the German war machine turned. The code books listed the day's rotor settings, the plug board arrangements, the stepping orders that made each message unique. It was like watching a magician's hands in slow motion after years of guessing the trick. Still, it wasn't victory. Not yet. The Germans changed their settings daily, sometimes twice a day. The team at Bletchley would have to anticipate the enemy's moves, to automate the decoding process faster than any human mind could manage. That's when the machines, the bombs, began to hum. Great metal beasts with spinning drums and clicking relays, designed to mimic Enigma's rhythm, each one a mechanical predator built to hunt logic itself. Wires glowed, wheels turned, and the sound of computation filled the hut like a metallic heartbeat. Every few hours, the operators would stop, write down a tentative match, and slide a decoded message across to a linguist who read it aloud in hushed disbelief. It was German, it was clear, and it was secret. The messages revealed convoy routes, U-boat positions, and even petty arguments between admirals and quartermasters. But one truth stood out among the chatter. The Germans believed Enigma was unbreakable. They sent orders, tactical updates, and even personal messages across it, confident that their words vanished into mathematical fog. Turing and his colleagues understood the magnitude of what they held. If the Germans ever suspected Enigma was compromised, they'd change it, rebuild it, and the Allies would be deaf again. So, every decoded message became a tightrope walk between use and exposure. They couldn't act on every discovery. Sometimes they had to let a convoy sail into danger to protect the secret that was saving millions. By 1943, the rhythm of Bletchley Park was relentless. Teams worked in rotating shifts, 20 hours a day, decoding and re-encrypting the very messages that would later feed back into German channels. Deception operations, double agents, and misinformation would all draw from this secret well. The Allies had learned not just to listen, but to speak with the enemy's voice, and soon, that voice would turn against itself. Autumn 1943. Somewhere in London, behind blackout curtains and layers of silence, a small group of intelligence officers gathered around a single table. On it lay a decoded German message, its ink still damp from the cipher office. The message was banal, a logistics report about a fuel convoy bound for the Eastern Front. But to the men in that room, it was an opportunity. Major Stuart Menzies, the head of British intelligence, ran a finger down the page. "We can use this," he murmured. "We can make them believe it's coming from one of their own." For the first time, the Allies weren't just intercepting Enigma. They were answering it, using captured codebooks, authentic Enigma machines, and even German-trained radio operators posing as Wehrmacht signalers. British intelligence began to weave false messages into the fabric of German command. These weren't clumsy fakes. They were perfect, timed with real transmissions, encoded with genuine Enigma settings, and sent from locations that matched enemy expectations. The deception was surgical. A false order here, a wrong coordinate there, and entire divisions began to shift unknowingly toward traps. Fuel supplies went missing. Reinforcements arrived at the wrong towns. In occupied France, entire battalions dug in against phantom invasions. One of the earliest operations came through a Luftwaffe channel in late 1943. Using a captured Enigma key, Allied cryptographers crafted a message warning of imminent sabotage at a coastal airstrip. Within hours, the German garrison evacuated its aircraft inland, leaving the strip undefended for an RAF raid that followed the next morning. The Germans never suspected deception. They blamed their own intelligence network for false alarms. Across the channel, in Bletchley's Hut 3, linguists watched it unfold through intercepted chatter. "They're arguing about phantom divisions again," one analyst remarked, his voice cracking from exhaustion. "They think someone inside the Wehrmacht's been compromised." By 1944, as Allied deception campaigns reached their zenith, Enigma-fed disinformation became a weapon of its own. Operation Fortitude, the masterstroke preceding D-Day, depended on it. Through false radio traffic, double agents, and manipulated Enigma channels, the Germans became convinced that the main invasion would strike Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. When the real assault began on June 6, 1944, many panzer divisions remained idle, awaiting an attack that would never come. In Berlin, codebreakers in the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, the German High Command, poured over their decrypted Allied intercepts, confident in the strength of Enigma. They didn't know that every secure report they read had already been read by Bletchley hours before. Their greatest cipher had become a mirror, one they were staring into without realizing it was reflecting their own downfall. The irony was devastating. German cryptanalysts even suspected that the Allies had developed a new secret code, one far more advanced than Enigma. They debated its structure, its method of randomization, unaware that their own trusted device, the mechanical god they believe infallible, had betrayed them through arrogance and routine. Meanwhile, at Bletchley, the work continued. Messages came in, were broken, rewritten, and fed back into the stream like ripples in a dark river. Turing, watching the evolution of the war's secret language, noted quietly in a letter to a colleague, "We have entered a strange new form of warfare, where silence speaks louder than artillery." He was right. For the first time in history, an entire front of war was being fought without a single shot fired, just signals, lies, and mathematics. Spring 1945. Berlin was cracking under the weight of its own ruin. Rubble filled the streets, radios screamed of strategic withdrawals, and Enigma machines clattered furiously in darkened command rooms as officers tried to make sense of the chaos bleeding in from every direction. Inside the Reich Chancellery's communications bunker, Colonel Erich Feldjebel, head of signals intelligence for the Wehrmacht, stared at a row of Enigma machines and knew something was wrong. The reports from the front didn't match. Orders issued hours earlier were being contradicted by replies supposedly sent by the same units. Convoys that had been instructed to move east appeared to vanish. Others appeared in Allied crosshairs within hours. The pattern was impossible, unless someone else was speaking through Enigma. Feldjebel had been one of Enigma's most ardent defenders. To him, the machine was a symbol of German ingenuity, elegant, unbreakable, flawless in its logic. But as Allied armies surged across the Rhine and the Luftwaffe's communications collapsed into static, even he began to suspect the unthinkable, that the enemy understood every word they were saying. By March, desperate attempts were made to redesign the system. The new Triton Enigma, equipped with extra rotors, was rolled out to U-boat fleets. But it was too late. Bletchley Park already had the capture key sheets and was reading those transmissions too. Every attempt to patch the leak only confirmed to the Allies how deeply they were entrenched in Germany's communication veins. On the other side of the channel, at Bletchley, the atmosphere was surreal. The war was ending, but the decoding huts never slept. Messages from collapsing German units arrived like the dying pulse of a once great beast. Panicked orders, desperate pleas for reinforcements, confusion among generals who no longer knew who to trust. Analysts called it the sound of Enigma dying. And yet, the Allies maintained the illusion to the very end. They never boasted of the capture of U-110 or the work of Turing and his colleagues. Even as Allied troops liberated Europe, most soldiers and officers had no idea that their victories had been guided by silent hands hidden behind British walls of secrecy. In April 1945, as Soviet troops stormed Berlin, a group of German code clerks destroyed their Enigma machines with hammers and thermite charges. Sparks and smoke filled the air, the brass rotors twisting and curling like old parchment. They had been ordered to leave no trace of the device that once secured Hitler's empire. But the destruction was symbolic. The secret was already gone, living in Allied vaults and mathematical memories. When the war ended, the truth remained buried under classification orders stamped ultra-secret. The Germans never learned, not then, how completely they'd been deceived. For decades, they believed the Allies had simply overwhelmed them with manpower, air power, and industrial might. The true weapon had been silence, a handful of mathematicians and engineers, turning the enemy's own voice against him. In the quiet that followed the war, Alan Turing walked the grounds of Bletchley one final time before its operations were shuttered. The huts stood empty now, their typewriters gone, their desks cleared. Somewhere far away, in the ruins of Berlin, a broken Enigma lay in the dirt, its keys blackened, the word Sieg, victory, half melted on the casing. Turing paused, hand brushing a wall where someone had scratched a note during the long nights of decoding. They will never know what we did here. And for a long time, they didn't. The Germans never realized that their greatest weapon had become their undoing. that the very machine meant to protect their empire had, in the end, whispered every one of its secrets to the enemy. If you like the story, then hit subscribe button. Thanks.